From a lab-created pigman stalking a mysterious forest in England to World War II ape soldiers and robotic orangutans, these are disturbing crossbreeding experiments in history conducted by evil scientists. Few have heard the eerie tale of Cannock Chase, a place that's haunted the fine people of Staffordshire, England for nearly a century. Cannock Chase, or the Chase as locals sometimes refer to it as, is known for a lot aside from the scenic nature. UFOs, lights in the sky, werewolves, giant snakes, a Bigfoot type creature, mysterious black cats, but then you have the Pie Green Tower, which sits in the middle of the forest, and it's here that people have reported spotting government officials sneaking about. The tower was built during the Cold War as a backup communication system, but some say there's more than just electronics hidden inside. One of the creepiest legends surrounding the tower is the story of the Pigman. It's said that shortly after World War II, British and American scientists teamed up for some very twisted experiments. They allegedly kidnapped a woman, hypnotized her, and then implanted her with a human-pig hybrid embryo. The woman carried the pregnancy for months, and eventually the scientists just assumed the experiment had failed. But a year later, they were shocked to discover she'd given birth to something human in body, but with the face and snout of a pig. The creature was terrified, and before scientists could get their hands on it, it leapt out of its mother's arms and fled into the woods. Ever since, there have been sightings of a tall figure with the head of a pig roaming the forest. Next, let's talk about humanzees, the attempt to create a chimpanzee-human hybrid. Now, stories of scientists trying to do this have been floating around for years in different parts of the world, and some of these stories actually are true, although they never actually worked. In the 1920s, a Soviet scientist named Ilya Ivanovich Ivanov tried to make a human-chimp hybrid. His plan was to inject human seed into female chimps. That failed, so his next move was pretty logical: try it the other way around. Take some ape DNA and try to impregnate human women. Now, thankfully that never happened. His orangutan died, and he was just exiled by the government. There are other rumors of ape-human hybrids, though. One of the most famous goes that in World War II, the Third Reich tried to create guerrilla human soldiers. There's no way of knowing if this was ever actually attempted, but the dictator of Germany was kinda out of his mind and was known to be into some pretty weird stuff, so I just really wouldn't put it past him. Well, here's a cryptid I've never heard of until today, the X-monkey. So the story goes that this ape creature was created in a lab in Kenya by an unknown scientist. But there is one rather famous name that's thrown around: Albert Einstein. I know nothing of Einstein ever setting foot in Kenya, but enlighten me in the comments if you have any information on this. Apparently the only reason he's sometimes brought up as a possible suspect is because he supposedly got really nervous whenever the subject came up. Because if there's anything we know about Einstein, it's that people were just constantly grilling him on an escaped robotic monkey stalking the jungles of Kenya. Oh yeah, spoilers, the X-monkey is partially robotic. Well, according to the legend, the X-monkey is about the size of an orangutan, and half of its face is robotic, including one glowing red eye, kinda like Kano from Mortal Kombat. Supposedly, some explorers in Kenya came across this abandoned lab where they found blueprints and a broken tank with hair inside. The hair had orangutan DNA mixed with artificial DNA. So it should really be called the X-ape, not the X-monkey, but hey, I don't name them. The blueprints matched exactly what locals would describe, and the name on the blueprint was just X. People say the X-monkey is dangerously smart and always faces sideways when stalking its prey in order to hide its partially metal face. Next, we have a real-life case of a successful head transplant using monkeys. This one is from the 70s, courtesy of neurosurgeon Dr. Robert White. Inspired by controversial scientists like Vladimir Demikov, Dr. White decided to take things to another level and transplant the head of one monkey onto the body of another. So, alright, it wasn't exactly crossbreeding, but it was still incredibly cruel and disturbing. To be fair, the goal behind the procedure was to understand spinal cord fusion and nerve connections. Dr. White was hoping to use this research to help paralyzed or severely disabled people gain new functional bodies. But here's the thing, no matter how noble the intention might have been, the idea of swapping heads between animals is just off-putting. The poor monkeys didn't survive for long after the surgeries. The head would stay alive, but the body couldn't function properly, and the monkeys eventually would just die because of complications. Did you know that killer bees, or Africanized honeybees, were actually created by accident? They're actually hybrid mistakes. Killer bees were created back in 1957 when a beekeeper in Brazil released 26 Tanzanian queen bees into a farm owned by biologist Warwick E. Kerr. Kerr was trying to crossbreed European bees with southern African bees to make a hardier bee that could produce more honey and thrive in tropical climates. But instead, he created a much more aggressive breed. These bees started to multiply and spread too, making their way from South America all the way into North America. They're not called killer bees for no reason. These bees are incredibly defensive and swarm in huge numbers. If they feel threatened, they'll attack anything and everything in their path. People have died from these attacks, about 2 each year in the United States alone. This one is pretty gross. In 2009, researchers in Russia and Belarus created genetically modified goats that could produce milk similar to human breast milk. It wasn't exactly the same, but it apparently contained about 60% of the proteins found in human milk. Then, not long after, a team in China took things to a different level and created 300 cows that could also produce this human-like milk. The idea was to mass produce it and then sell it in grocery stores, hoping people would decide to buy milk that came from genetically modified farm animals. The Chinese team even aimed to have it on shelves by 2014. It's been over a decade now, and that milk is thankfully not available. The whole thing was just a little too weird for people, and the project got delayed and I guess stopped. The Goatman. This is a creepy creature that's become a huge part of Maryland's local lore. It's said to be a half-man, half-goat being that roams the woods. The legend says it's the result of a failed science experiment, with some stories dating back to the late 30s. But it really took off in the 70s. Locals began reporting strange disappearances of dogs, some blaming them on the Goatman. Of course, others thought the dogs just got hit by passing trains or eaten by other animals, but that did not stop the rumors. People describe the Goatman, it's pretty obvious, right? It's a human face but covered in hair with horns. Some say it just has goat legs but with a more human-like body. It's said to live in shelters deep in the woods and attack anything it comes across, including, of course, people. A popular story is that the Goatman was at one time a scientist named Dr. Stephen Fletcher, who worked at the Beltsville Agricultural Research Center. Legend has it that a messed up goat experiment turned him into the creature. The story really spread in 1971 after a dog's death was blamed on the Goatman, and it became a horror story that young people would tell each other while hanging out at lovers' lanes. Next up we have Beefalo. Now this also kind of sounds like a cryptid, but it isn't. This is 100% real. Beefalo are this disturbing product of crossbreeding buffalo and domestic cattle, created by humans to improve beef production. To make them, breeders usually pair a domestic bull with a female American bison. These hybrids were designed to produce leaner, more flavorful meat, while being easier to raise than wild bison. What's unsettling is that unlike many other hybrids, Beefalo can reproduce on their own, making them even more dangerous for uncontrolled breeding. Now, typically, they're about 37.5% bison, looking mostly like cattle, but some are 50% or more bison, and those are called catalo. The more bison-like ones are often classified as exotic animals rather than livestock. Now, this whole thing though of tweaking with living things for profit and human consumption just doesn't sit right with me, and I'm guessing a lot of you would probably agree. I mean, what's wrong with just a standard, regular steak? If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Alright, I'm bored talking about animals. Let's talk about human-alien hybrids. Everyone's heard stories about the government carrying out weird experiments at Area 51, but there's also another mysterious government facility said to exist, Dulce Base. The story goes back to the 80s, when engineer and UFO researcher Paul Bennewitz claimed that he intercepted strange communications between aliens and the United States government. Bennewitz said he found proof that the government was running an underground base, Dulce Base, where all kinds of very creative experiments were happening. The rumor was that the facility was mainly being used to create human-alien hybrids. Now, why would the US government and extraterrestrials want to do this? Well, I guess if you want to go full-on conspiracy, it's cause it would make it easier for them to infiltrate society and accomplish whatever goal the two parties came up with. I'd just love to have been a fly on the wall, watch top secret government officials and aliens broach the subject of interspecies mating. How awkward was that conversation? And who brought it up first, the aliens or the US government? Humans tampering with nature and crossbreeding animals, that's a pretty recent thing, right? Well, wrong. The Kunga is one of the earliest known hybrid animals. These creatures were bred around 4,500 years ago in what is now Syria, by crossbreeding a donkey with a now extinct animal called a hemipi or hemip. Kungas were highly prized, extremely expensive, and likely created for military purposes. Researchers uncovered Kunga skeletons at an ancient burial site in northern Syria, dating back to around 2600 BCE. They weren't horses, and they didn't match any known horse relatives either. After analyzing the DNA, scientists confirmed that these strange creatures had a donkey mom and a hemipi dad. This makes the Kunga the oldest known hybrid animal bred by humans. The Kunga would have been pretty strong, able to pull wagons, and the mix of traits would have made them more manageable than pure wild asses who were impossible to tame. But since the hemipi went extinct in 1929, these creatures can't be made ever again. With all that said, I've been your host, James. Catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.